Gender and variation of experience, background and aspiration on leadership. The study was undertaken to examine the English Hockey League coach characteristics. This was age, ability and experience. These coach characteristics are known antecedents of actual coach leadership behaviour, and of coach leadership behaviour has been found to have a direct influence on team performance. So my piece of research developed from a noticeable reduction in the number of women hockey coaches in the English Hockey League. The aim of this research was to investigate whether there was a significant difference between the male hockey coaches and the female hockey coaches in the English Hockey League. And we looked at this in terms of age, experience, aspiration and leadership. The hypothesis was tested in this study on the personal characteristics of the English Hockey League coaches. So the background to the study was that there's been a noticeable reduction, down actually by 30% in the Premier Division in the early 2000s. And the questions that arose from this was, well, was it due to the personality of the coaches? Was it due to the leadership style of the coaches? Or was it something to do with the structure of the training? So using Cheladurai's multidimensional framework in the leadership scale for sport, we measured the components of leadership, and then we also got the personal characteristics of each leader, so the gender, the age, the level, the experience, and their aspiration, as they're all known as antecedents of leadership behaviour. The return completion rate for our study was very high. We had a 64% return. That was 27 males and 14 females. So if we look at coach age, experience and gender, we can see from the slide here that the male and female coaches, in terms of their age, were actually very similar. From an experience level, the female coaches had a far greater coaching experience than the male coaches, with 80% of the female coaches in the study having coached for over 10 years, compared to only 36% of those male coaches. So again, what we're starting to see here is that with females, when they're looking to coach, there's a tendency that they have to, or they perceive they have to have a higher level of experience in order to actually begin their coaching journey. We then move on to coach qualifications. We can see that of the qualifications gained by the 41 coaches in the study, a greater percentage of the higher level qualifications, so in the England hockey that's level 3 and level 4, had actually been obtained by the female coaches. 72% of the female coaches had level 3 or above, compared to only 40% of the male coaches, whilst 60% of the male coaches had level 2 or below, compared to 28% of the female coaches. And interestingly, all of the female coaches taking part in the study had a qualification level which exceeded level 1, which is the first qualification level which is possible to achieve. There was no significant relationship between the level of coach qualification, though, and the gender of the coach. So, level coached and gender. Of the male coaches in the study, 50% had already coached teams of international standard, with 20% of those being at senior team standard. Within the female coaches, 84% had coached at international standard, but 66% of those were at junior, so that's under 21, under 18 or under 16, international standard. And you can see this highlighted in the diagram there. Though all of the female coaches had worked at a standard higher than the National League, this was not the case for the male coaches. The results of a chi-square analysis shows there's no significant association, though, between highest level of team coached and gender of coaches. This may be due to the slightly smaller sample size that we had. If we then investigate the coaches' playing standard and gender, again we can see this in the figure, we can see that in terms of their own playing standard, of the male coaches, 27% had not played at the standard of the league in which they were presently coaching, and 46% had played to senior international standard. However, when we consider the female coaches, all of the female coaches had played to National League standard, and 40% had played at international senior level. Again, statistically analysing the data, the results of the chi-square analysis found there was no significant relationship, though, between playing standard and coach gender. The next question asked the coaches about their aspiration level. And this really is where we start to see some interesting differences. So the aspiration of 70% of the male coaches was to coach to a senior international team level. The level of aspiration of these male coaches was found to be significantly greater than the aspiration of the female coaches. So we're actually starting to see, even with this small sample size of 41, that there's a difference in terms of where do the coaches want to go and where do they see themselves developing their careers. So the summary really of this piece of research suggested that even though the coaches were all of a similar age, the female coaches had more experience than the male coaches. The female coaches held a higher coaching qualification than the male coaches. This higher level of qualification of the female coaches actually supports the previous research and the previous findings which has occurred in business, where females perceive that they have to be more qualified than their male counterparts to be accepted in their leadership role. Though it is not necessarily true that a higher level of qualification would indicate a greater degree of competency. The male coaches in our study, so that was of the 41, were significantly more aspirational with regard to their future level of team coached. Not an alternative, but another study which was conducted at the time looked at the personality characteristics of the male coaches and of the female coaches. And interestingly, aspiration is part of the personality trait of conscientiousness. The studies from our other piece of research looking at personality found that the coaches in our study showed a higher degree of conscientiousness compared to the normal population. So thank you very much, and I hope that you found the talk interesting, looking at coaches, the difference between the males and females for several different characteristics. Thank you.